Today I wanted to talk to you about plagiarism and specifically cover Chapter 7, which is about ethical writing and plagiarism. This chapter goes into quite a bit of detail, and it is something you should read because it's going to help you write that first essay. So, what does format have to do with ethics? This is a question a lot of students wonder. Teachers say, I want my papers in MLA format, or I want my papers in APA format, and students don't see why that's important. But it comes down to trust. So, if you think about whether or not you trust people who follow the rules, most people do because those people are predictable. You know where you stand when you're with someone who is following the rules. Would you trust a teacher who is disorganized or takes a very long time to return grades? And the problem there is that you never really know where you stand. How are you doing? Are you learning what you need to learn? And of course, if you want to bring it right down to home, think about whether or not you have siblings. Have any of them ever intentionally lied to get you in trouble? And if that happened, how did that affect your opinion of them? So ethics matter. Part of writing honestly is being able to distinguish your ideas from the ideas of others. Now this can get a little tricky because sometimes you form your ideas as you do research. So whether it's deliberate or accidental, plagiarism can actually destroy a person's career. It can also affect you in the business world. If you don't give proper credit to someone who did a big project and you take their credit for them, it becomes an issue of trust and people don't think you're ethical and they don't want to work with you. So material that you copy and paste from one source to your paper must be treated as a quote and then cited as a source on the works cited page. Both of those things have to happen in order for you to not accidentally commit plagiarism. Formatting and citing sources helps the reader, who is the researcher, know what is being said is true or fair. So you establish your own credibility and worthiness by saying, so-and-so writes, and then putting what they wrote in their piece. Then you comment on that to show how their statement, how you either believe it to be true, untrue, or how it fits into your theory. And it helps the reader see you as an authority. Anytime someone gives credit where credit is due, we build trust. When students plagiarize, there's a lot of things that can happen, and even Lone Star has its own academic integrity policy. It's actually in your syllabus. Academic integrity is the politically correct way to talk about plagiarism. A lot of things can happen, and the student who is found guilty of plagiarism is just on the receiving end of whatever is decided. The consequences for plagiarism are often determined first by the professor, and then the professor works directly with the academic dean, or sometimes even student services, and it can go up the chain of command depending on how egregious the problem is. One thing that a lot of teachers will do is they will sign a 0 for the assignment and not allow you to make it up. Sometimes they will withdraw you from the course. If you have a declared major, you could actually be withdrawn from your program, which means that you wouldn't be able to continue in that major. And the worst possible thing that would happen academically is you get expelled from the college. The problem with getting expelled from the college is they hold your credits and they do not transfer, so you have to completely redo your entire degree. So what is plagiarism? It's actually defined in our textbook on page 165. Plagiarism includes summarizing, paraphrasing, copying, or translating words, ideas, artworks, audio, video, computer programs, statistical data, or any other creative work without appropriate attribution. Plagiarism can be accidental or deliberate. It can be a partial or complete. No matter which, the penalties are often similar. And understanding what constitutes plagiarism is your first step to avoiding it. The bottom line is plagiarism is theft. Stealing an idea or phrase is the same as stealing someone's wallet. It's a breach of ethics. We have a moral obligation to each other to preserve someone's work and ideas. Plagiarism is taking unearned and unfair advantage, and it damages human relationships in society. Is this plagiarism? Using a paper you find online. That's pretty obvious. If you're taking an entire paper out of some database or some paper mill service on the internet, yes, that's absolute plagiarism. What about using passages from online sources without citing the source? Yes, that's plagiarism also. Just because you find it online doesn't mean you don't have to cite it. Inadequate paraphrasing. This is something that happens quite often in college because learning to paraphrase is rather difficult. So sometimes students don't reword things properly. Sometimes people just forget to add the quotes, or they forget to close the quotes or open the quotes. That's kind of where proofreading comes in with plagiarism, and it's really important so that you don't inadvertently plagiarize. What about paraphrasing without a citation? Yes, that's also plagiarism. You must cite the source after the paraphrase and again on the works cited page. And then the one that's really tricky is misrepresenting or misinterpreting a source. And that's plagiarism too because it's unfairly discussing what one person says. If I were to say that Jack looks bad wearing black and white stripes, the comment itself is not bad. But if someone turns around and says, oh, she doesn't like anything that Jack wears, that's unfair because you're basing an entire assumption on one outfit that I didn't like. You can't misrepresent a source. That's also integrity. You must be fair to what the source actually said as well as the spirit of it. So you can't just cherry pick lines out of essays because you need so many quotes. You have to actually understand the spirit behind that quote. A lot of times students get in trouble with this one. So inadequate paraphrasing can be tricky because you have to use only your own words in a paraphrase, not a mixture of your words and the sources. So a paraphrase won't have some of your words and some of the original piece's words. It'll all be your words. Even if you cite the source and your paraphrase, if you've included word for word sections, then you've plagiarized. You can paraphrase and quote, and sometimes that's necessary. So, for example, when would it be necessary to quote? When something cannot be rephrased without losing the spirit of it. For example, lines from the Gettysburg Address or from the I Have a Dream speech. Those are so well written. They speak so closely to the spirit of the entire piece that to reword them will sometimes take away its effect. Okay, let's look at an example of a paraphrase. So I'm going to read this. The origins of jazz and urban music stemmed from the countryside of the South as well as the streets of America's cities. It resulted from two distinct musical traditions, those of West Africa and Europe. West Africa gave jazz its incessant rhythmic drive, the need to move, and the emotional urgency that has served the music so well. The European ingredients had more to do with classical qualities pertaining to harmony and melody. The blending of these two traditions resulted in a music that played around with the meter and reinterpreted the use of notes in new combinations, creating blue notes that expressed feelings both sad and joyous. The field hollers of southern sharecropping slaves, combined with the more urban stylistic sounds of musicians from New Orleans, created a new music. Gospel music from the church melded with what became known in the 20th century as the blues, and offered a vocal ingredient that translated well into instruments. So these are two paragraphs, and you want to paraphrase them because they have some really good information in there. So you start by looking at what each paragraph is talking about. So this first paragraph is talking about the origins of jazz and how it came from a combination of urban music and music from the South. It also brings in some West African and European ingredients. So one possible way to paraphrase that one is to say it this way. John Eflin notes that while it's associated with American cities, jazz has its roots in the musical traditions of both West Africa and Europe. It combines aspects of European harmony and melody and West African rhythmic drive in a new and emotionally expressive ways. Due to these diverse influences, jazz produced new rhythmic and melodic combinations that convey upbeat and sorrowful feelings. Okay, so the first sentence of this paraphrase discusses jazz and that it started in American cities, but it's really a combination of some other things, including music from West Africa and Europe. The next sentence, we actually do see a couple of quotes. Because harmony and melody is exact words from the original, we have to quote that. And then same with rhythmic drive. There might not be any other way to say harmony and melody, and you wouldn't want to say melody and harmony because that is an inadequate paraphrase. Rhythmic drive, the same thing. There might not be any other way to say that, so we have to stay true to what Eflin said and keep those in quotes. The last sentence. Due to these diverse influences, jazz produced a new rhythmic and melodic combinations that convey upbeat and sorrowful feelings. And that's very close to what we saw originally when he talked about these two ingredients coming together for harmony and melody and rhythm. The second paragraph, jazz also represents the merging of several strands of African American musical expression, including the hollers of the field hands, church gospel singing, and the stylized sounds of musicians from New Orleans. Okay, so this one sentence here also summarizes the last paragraph of Eflin's work because it shows us the merging of the music styles. And again, you see the quotes here because we can't rephrase those. A holler is a holler. There's no other way to say that. So what is the problem with quoting? Most students think that if they quote something that it's fine and they're covered as far as plagiarism goes. And that is true, technically. You are covered with any accusations of plagiarism. However, you should only quote when to paraphrase would impact the importance of the message or if there's a detailed theory that's too difficult to paraphrase without losing the message. When you quote too much, the reader loses your, meaning the writer's, voice and style, which is their way of writing, and it becomes confusing. It ends up sounding almost like a yo-yo. John says, quote. Jack says the other quote. Susan says the next quote. And I never really know what your style is in writing. And what's very important, even in any kind of writing, is that you always remain true to yourself and you convey the messages you want to convey. As a general rule, quotes should take up no more than 10 to 15% of your paper's length. In a 3-page essay, quotes should be no more than about 2 to 5 lines long. So you really want to aim for paraphrasing as much as possible. Sometimes students go over the 10 to 15%. This 10 to 15% would correspond to a Turnitin report. For example, if you have an instructor who says, I don't want more than 20% similarity, then that would tell them you've got too many quotes. So the problem in that is not just that you probably copied and pasted information from other sources. The problem is, are you able to digest and rephrase that information, which actually shows that you truly mastered the material. So common knowledge is something that people get a little bit confused on. What do I cite? What do I not cite? So basically, common knowledge means facts that are widely known and which there's no controversy. For example, Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. Now, you might find that you cannot remember the name of the Gettysburg Address. So you Google Abraham Lincoln Civil War speeches, and then probably the first thing that'll pop up, which will be Wikipedia, will have a citation for Abraham Lincoln, and in that it will probably list a lot of his more famous speeches. And you'll go through the list, you'll think, oh yeah, that's right, it's called the Gettysburg Address. You've technically done research, but there's really no controversy surrounding who delivered the Gettysburg Address. Same with an example of William Shakespeare was born in Stratford upon Avon in 1564. It's widely known. So even if you can't remember this kind of stuff and you look it up and you find it on a source similar to or on Wikipedia, chances are it's still okay to include and you wouldn't have to cite something like that. So support for paraphrasing. Your textbook actually has a great discussion with examples about paraphrasing on pages 168 to 170. And I encourage you to really study that as you go to complete your discussion board. I'll see you on the next video.